You guys want to start laughing for some reason? I don't know. We got to fake this intro.
That's perfect. I hope he uses that.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Kavod Family Podcast. We got Casey Wilson, Danny Antoine, Justin Bohner, and Travis Shook. Good morning, gents.
Morning.
What's up?
Well, we are in part 4 of a 4-part series, Identity, Call, Forge, and Reign. These are 4 building blocks that every person, man or woman, young or old, it's just the framework that you should have in your mind as you begin to think about where I'm at, where I'm going, what's my purpose, where do I find my value. All of those questions are answered if you can grab these 4 pillars. And so this is massive for us, and we'll probably talk about it over and over and over and over again. I mean, if you're going to assess a business where they're at, this is what you're doing. You're asking them, what's the purpose of this business? Where do you want it to go? What's the goal of it? Why do you want to get it there? And how do you get it? Like you're processing through those things. And so we're going to jump in today, and we're going to talk about reigning, what it means to rule well, what it means to lead well, what it means to achieve this. And for us, this isn't just associated with like, I'm a father, now I'm ruling. That's not the aim. I'm a father, and a father has to go through the process of, okay, children have arrived. Now I've got to accept this banner and this responsibility, the calling that God has given to me to be a father. And then you got to go through the grind of becoming a good father. And then eventually you get to a point where you're actually looking at yourself going, hey, I'm making disciples of Christ and not just a bad dad, right? I'm doing this well. And that's what we want. We want to be able to look at ourselves and not just say we're surviving. We want to be able to look in the mirror and say, because of Christ in me, I'm thriving in this responsibility. So do you guys want to jump in? If not, I've got some definitions of what it means to be a good leader, and we can start there if you want to. Does that work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
We threw that last one out in the last episode from Doug Wilson, the glad assumption of sacrificial responsibility. Right? We talked about that a little bit.
That one's intense. It's really easy to have your eyes glaze over on that one. You're like, yeah, okay, cool. But like the glad assumption, the fact that you're assuming that's just, it is what it is. Glad assumption.
Yeah. Isn't that good?
Those two are so weighty, and it's so much to unpack there. The glad assumption of sacrificial
responsibility. So in a very simple setting, this is what that means for me. If we're gathered around a table for prayer, it means as a father figure, I'm assuming the responsibility to lead this meal and just make sure it goes well. That doesn't mean that I have to pray and hold the conversation. It means that I have to assume the responsibility for the success of the night. And if it starts to go bad, who's ultimately responsible? Me.
Yeah, that last night at dinner, I always eat like someone in the military. I eat like really, really fast without breathing, and my kids are all still, they've taken like 3 bites, and so when I get done eating, we'll do family worship at the table, and my oldest son just looked over at me and he said, "We haven't done family worship in a long time, Dad." And I just said, "You're right.
Well done, son. Well done. That was a test.
That's on me." Like,
You over there eating like a savage, Dad.
Like, that's what it is. Like, I don't go, "Well, you guys took too long in the bath," or "You didn't get your homework done," or this or that or this or that. Ultimately, that falls to me. And that's what we're talking about here. That's the whole point of the reigning is taking responsibility for others and for yourself and for the things around you gladly.
Mm-hmm. Like, that is huge, because I'm one to...
Begrudgingly.
Yes.
Yeah.
With my kids, like, to an extent. So hear me out. I want them to understand, because I want them when they grow up as adults to not be spoiled and entitled little brats, like, most of the world. So whenever I'm sacrificing, and from a joyful heart, I want them to know, not to thank me, but to see the weight in it. Like, you don't understand the weight of Christ's sacrifice until you understand where you were going. But I take that to the far wrong extreme. Like, Dad, can I go to the skate park? And I want to be like, yeah, well, I got up at 4 and I'm like, no, just love him. Like, just be a dad.
Chill out, bro.
But there's a huge difference there. Like, there is moments where you need to teach. Like, and this is where you come in as like the father. Like, hey, mom. No, mom's had, and I'll list what she's done and make him see the weight and her responsibility and what she's done for him and not be spoiled. But, like, as a father, just shut up and love them. Like, show them. Don't list everything like your badge of honor that you have done, and you should feel bad because I've done all this, but I'll do it for you because I'm a good dad and I love Jesus. Like, no, that's completely wrong, and I'm guilty of that.
Or even with our spouse, right? Like, it's easy to think in a parent-son relationship. When you think spouse, because you tend to think more equals, or at least culture does, right? What we're saying is it's the husband's responsibility when a wife says, wow, we haven't gone on a date in a while. It's not, well, then you need to get a babysitter and plan something. It's not that.
These are all things you don't say, by the way, just so y'all know.
But it's what goes through our flesh, right? And it's actually, okay, I have to pause and think, how do I change my schedule, and how do I solve this problem, and then how do I fix this so that way we get more and more time together? And that takes effort. And, we're in that. And you go through that season where you're doing good with that, and then you got to fight for it again. You're doing good with it, fight for it again.
I the time that I get to sometimes stretch is like late at night, and I got to wait till like everybody goes to sleep. Then I get out of the bed, and I was getting ready to do it the other night. And my wife looks at me, and she goes, and I thought she was asleep, and she opens her eyes and she says, where you going? I said, I'm about to sit and stretch. She goes, well, can you lay here with me for a second? And I thought to myself, golly, you mess stuff up on the easiest. That was an easy layup right there, man. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you get back in the bed, bro. Like you just relax. Like she needs that time. You know what I mean?
She's more
and if you don't,
important than your
if you don't get your body right after this, do it tomorrow. But what's more important than that time with her? But in my mind, like at first I was like, how in the world did you miss that? You're such a scrub.
So this is probably the biggest one for me because it's the one that hits home. For me, it is the man's responsibility to pursue forgiveness and reconciliation every time. Whether he's the one at fault, whether she's the one at fault, it doesn't, because I can take an argument.
Say it to the people out there, yes. Say
All
it
right,
to the
here
people.
we go. It is my responsibility as the man, even if my wife or somebody else is at fault, I have to take the responsibility to initiate reconciliation. And so I have to search and ask, is there anything that I can ask for forgiveness for? Because I'm sure I carry, even if it's 10%, I carry some responsibility in this. And I've got to probably
even if it's 10%.
And the truth is, it's probably like 90%, right?
Yeah.
That just hit me hard, man. Thanks for saying that. And honey, I'm sorry for all the times that I have not done that, because that's an epic fail. As men, we got to understand we have to be able to. That's at least we can do. And I know every man will be like, hey man, I didn't mess that up that time. She said this. Shut your pie hole and do what you're told, man.
Yeah, even think about it, because I know it would be natural for a lot of men to be like, well, I want my wife's hard and I want her to ask for forgiveness or something. But even that act is your sanctification, because the issue is my passivity. The issue is my leadership, right? And so all things working together for the good, you have to, if you believe that anthem, there's no setting where you can sit at it and say, well, this is really about you. There's nothing. It's all includes you.
Assumption of
sacrificial. Here's one of the big problems, and these types of verses, and I like where this conversation on the reigning is going. You don't even have to use that word. You just talk about what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman of God. But so often we go straight to those verses that say, "Wives, submit to your husbands," but there are 20 verses after that tells the husband how he is to sacrifice for the wife. And one of the biggest game changers for you in this, that you'll realize in this reigning process that you have to go through over and over and over again, is Paul never says, and make sure your wife is submitting to you. Make sure that your wife is loving you the way that you think she needs to be loving you. He says, sacrifice.
Right.
Sacrifice, sacrifice, sacrifice. Even if your wife does not love you in the way that she's supposed to love you,
Doesn't matter.
that's not what God called you to do.
It's not by
He didn't
merit.
call you to make sure that she reciprocates the effort that you're putting in. It's exactly what you're talking about. What if you go back and you say, please forgive me? And what if she doesn't say, forgive me too? Then you're just pissed and you go back downstairs and then you got to come back and ask for forgiveness for that too.
You know,
And then you got to apologize for that.
Exactly. Yeah.
what's ironic in this is, because we said it in the last episode, is when you find enjoyment in the forging, you then are qualified to reign.
Yeah.
The epitome of reigning is sacrificing, which is a continuation of forging. Like, you're able to reign because you never really leave forging. You just found out how to be happy in the forging.
Yeah, it's the point in forging where you actually realize, okay, the reason you're forging me is so that I can forge the generation behind me or the people behind me. That's why you're taking me through this. So I can, it's like Paul in 1 Corinthians 11, when he gets to the point where he can say, because the anthem has been imitate Christ, imitate Christ, imitate Christ, follow me, follow me, follow me. That's what Jesus came and said to his disciples. And then Paul gets to a point where he looks back and he's like, wait a minute, there's a Timothy back there. Wait a minute, there's others back there. And he says, imitate me as I imitate Christ.
But see, what to expound and elaborate, because I think we missed it. I want to sit in it a little bit longer. The reason why you get to reign is because you found contentment in the forging. And when you find contentment in the forging, you realize it's not about you. Who cares about Casey? It's about Christ. So if you can understand how to sit in the forging and be content. Paul was in jail and wrote most of the New Testament. I have learned to be content in all things. I just read this morning. I'm going to see if I can find it and come back to it. But like, they were listing, and man, it's going to bother me until I remember it. Basically, Jesus was doing all these amazing things, and God was like, that is amazing. You chase after justice, and you hate what's evil. I'm going to reward you with contentment. And you're like, what? Like, I'm gonna do this monstrous task that is almost impossible, and you're going to reward me with contentment. And when you're content in the forging, you naturally reign well.
Well, I think this is the thing that you're zooming in on that is so important. The forging doesn't stop when you're reigning. The forging equips you to be forged while leading others.
Exactly. And that's where,
right?
That's it.
Like that the forging doesn't stop when you are reigning. Again, it's just making you able to withstand the forging and add to that a wife, children,
Timothy's.
a business,
Yep.
right? That's why so often we as men jump straight to we want to reign. But it's like, dude, you haven't. It's like with the Navy SEALs. They said the whole point of the training and the Hell Week and all of that is not the bodily thing, it's the mental thing. Your body can go as long as you want. It's a mental thing so that when you are in war, your mind doesn't fail.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, is so that you add to it. The whole point is adding to it more and more and more and more and more responsibility, right? And if you haven't been in that forging process, you're not even responsible for yourself.
The forging solidifies your identity.
Yes.
It solidifies it. So look here, like Jesus knew who he was. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of uprightness, the scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. So, you have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the idea of like, you've done this amazing thing, and now you're content.
Mm-hmm.
Content in me. When you layer that out, reigning is you're content in forging. Forging, you're working out your identity. You're walking out your identity because the prize is him. And you understood that in your identity. He is the prize. You get it in the beginning, and then you just live it out in different shades and platforms.
Have you guys ever heard that old story? And I don't know if it's true or not, but it's about Sam Walmart. You guys know Walmart, the franchise that blew up, everything that went around. There's a story that I heard that he would look at the stores that are doing the worst, the ones that have the worst profit, the worst margins, everything. And he would actually go to them. And when he got there, he would actually be a door greeter. And he would stand at the door and smile and greet people as they walked in. And he would watch just by leading that way, by greeting people, treating them with respect, treating them with honor, that the staff would begin to follow and change their habits. And that those stores would actually rise in profit just by him being a door greeter. Think about that.
That's pretty awesome.
Isn't that incredible?
You know, reigning is leadership, no matter how you look at it. You guys just brought up about with the whole marriage thing. I had a couple young men I met with this morning, and one of the questions, they were studying out of Timothy, and they asked me, one of them asked me, well, what does it look like for a wife to be submitted in a way that's pleasing to God? And really, what I had an opportunity to lead him back to is in Ephesians. Yes, the word says that a wife is supposed to be submitted to a husband, but that is not given apart from the fact that the husband has to first be submitted to Christ. Yeah. So, in other words, in order for you to be a good leader, first learn how to be a good follower. In order for you to be a good father, first learn how to be a good son. Okay? If he says to follow, he says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. That means what? He died for her. He died for the church. He was tortured to death for the church because he loves us so much. Husbands, how in the world do we take these scriptures in the church and demand for a wife to be submitted when you're unsubmitted yourself? It's the dumbest thing ever. You cannot do that.
You got to read verse 21. You got to read verse 21 that comes before it.
Submitting to one another in the fear of God.
Then you read.
In the fear of God.
Right.
Right?
That's how that whole section really begins.
To me, reigning is leadership. Leadership has everything to do with being a good follower first. The centurion is one of my favorite people in that. When he goes to Jesus and asks Jesus to, heal his servant, Jesus says, okay, take me to him. He says, whoa, I know how this works, right? If you just speak the word, my servant will be healed, right? But then this is what he says. He says, for I too am a man under authority. And I say to this one, go, and he goes. And I say to this one, come, and he comes. He just said two completely different things in the same sentence. I am a man under authority. You would think after he said that, he would say, I'm a man also under authority. So whatever they tell me to do, I do it right. I do it well, right? No, that's not what he said. He said, I too am a man under authority. And then I say to someone to go, and then they go. He's saying, I learned how to be under authority so well that my authority to others actually got projected well.
Wow.
I cannot be a good leader without first being a good follower. Jesus was called what? A servant leader. Not just a leader, a servant leader. So he was an ultimate example of how we're supposed to lead. And everything that he did with the disciples, very opposite to how we do things. That's why even when he got down to wash their feet, what was Peter's first assumption?
Not mine.
Let you wash my feet? Yeah. Right? You're the Messiah. And Jesus is telling him, no, you're still not getting it, Peter. And Peter's like, well, if that's the case, wash my whole body.
That passage is
go the whole way.
That passage is incredible. I think it's John 13, because before he bows down and washes their feet, before he takes the towel, he says, knowing who he was and that he was going back to the Father, he took the towel, bent down, and washed their feet. And you go, in the moment of service, he's recognizing identity. Like he does not
Calling,
work out front.
Forge and reign,
So
all
good.
in one.
Let me read one more definition of spiritual leadership, because you brought up leadership. And I think this hits the point, goes back to the glad assumption of sacrificial responsibility. This is John Piper. It comes out of his little spiritual leadership book. He says, I define spiritual leadership as knowing where God wants people to be. That's the assumption. Knowing where God wants people to be and taking the initiative to use God's methods to get them there in reliance on God's power. Isn't that good? That's that point of reigning, right? Like when I think about my children, there's a point where I have to know where God wants them to get, and I have to know where they're at. And I have to learn how to use God's means and God's power to get them there. And that's the goal.
The main thing with that is like not, hey, I see that Nate's going to be this kind of business person, or that she could be an actor. Like, the occupation, the calling is irrelevant.
Yes.
It's how do I get Nate to fall in love with God? How do I get Everly to understand how to spend time with God? How do I get Reed to understand that God is his dad? So Reed's been messing up. Like I said, he needs some dad time. So I've been talking to him. He's like, I just feel embarrassed. Like, I don't want to go to God because I'm embarrassed. I said, okay, good. You articulated that. Most grown men can't get that. He said, and I know it's a lie from Satan. And I said, really? He said, yeah, because. I said, what does it say? He says, you take everything to God and you go before his throne. I said, yes. So walk that out. Why would Satan not want you to go with him? He's like, because he wasn't sure. I said, I'm your dad. When you mess up, I might discipline you depending on what it is, but I want to teach you. I want to show you. I want you to come to me, and then I show you how to go to God. Because if I'm gone, you're going to go to him, right? So this idea of like, you're reigning. Don't think of like business owner. I'm a king. I'm getting everything done. I'm conquering. No, you're figuring out how to bring whoever you're in leadership over to God, how to usher them into his presence, and he leads them. Yeah. You just take them to him, show him how to have fun. Like how you said Walmart, the door greeter, like he gave an example to chase after. Like, think of that, though, the contentment in that, because the contentment is, there it is again. He's the owner of everything. They're not doing good. He's not like, I'm going to come in and rule over everybody. I'm going to greet at the door. It's the same thing that Christ did when he washed the feet. Like, that is a practical way of doing it now.
Yeah. Just to sum this all up, I mean, take David. Let's just follow David's life. Here's a boy in the woods learning to walk with his father to defend sheep. Go take care of the sheep. Learn to care and love for others. This is your calling, right? Eventually, the same way he took care of those sheep would be the way that he leads his men to battle. It'd be the way that he leads the nation. We see last episode, we talked about how David slayed Goliath. Why? Because he saw the fear inside of his brothers and he wanted to conquer the fear that was in them. He wanted to help them to see God's promises and not just the emotions and the things around them, right? We see that after David is appointed and anointed as king, when he fully actually takes the throne at age 30, that he immediately goes and he sacks Jerusalem, this
fortified fortress.
Yeah, you can't get in, you can't take it. You know, they mock him. They stand there and say, even the blind, the Jebusites say, even the blind could fight against you and win.
Let's run with this so we can go fast version. How does he conquer it?
Oh, he sends his men. One of them comes up with a plan. They go up through the water well, right? They take the city from the inside out. David takes his city. He has now, now he has a city, the city of God for the people of God. Like it's set apart for him. But he does it. I mean, if you go and look at it, the whole time there's this repeated thing of, and Yahweh, the God of hosts, was with him. You know, it's a recognition that God was with them. God called them to do this. God did this for them. And that's the point of reigning, right? That they're doing it and achieving these things because they're doing it in God's will, right? That's ultimately what they see. And the people, their hearts are changed.
And I see the theme throughout his whole life until he loses sight of who he was is God's glory. To kill Goliath because he was blaspheming God is for God's glory. To take this city and to have this fortified fortress for God and to lead the nation well, to reign over the nation well, was to worship God and to give God glory. And he wanted to set up this house for God, right, which we know is for his son. But look where he went wrong. He went wrong at a time where men were meant to go to war, where he was supposed to be in his calling, in the forging process, which solidified his identity. He stayed home and started looking at a woman. Oh, man. But then whenever that unravels and he murdered the guy and committed adultery, what did he do? His heart is broken. And it wasn't for like my crown and my kingdom. It was, God, why did I do that to you? Yeah. Like my heart, like I don't desire sacrifice, but a broken and contrite heart. Like that's what God wants. And David was wrecked by that. And that's still why Jesus is called the Son of David. The dude with one of the most royal screw-ups in the Bible, Jesus is called the Son of David because of his heart posture. And that's how it started. That's why he was chosen in the field, because of his heart, which is his identity, which is his sonship.
Well, let's bring this to a close and kind of just wrap it up. How does this relate to Christ? Take this and seal it all up in what he's done for us.
I think that this is actually the linchpin thing that you need to keep on in your mind as you listen to these podcast episodes, and your mind is going a million different places at once. You're looking at your life and going, whoa, this is not good. If what these guys sitting around this table are saying is true, this is not good. And this is what I want you guys to understand here. The point of all of this is Christ. And yes, we can derive these 4 pillars from the life of David, maybe the life of Paul, many other people in the Bible, but ultimately, we see it in Christ, right? What do we see? We see him at his baptism, right? The heavens open. What does he say?
This is my beloved
Beloved son. Boom. Identity. What's the next thing? The Spirit led him into the wilderness to be tempted, right? Well, he knew his calling, right? He was a son, then he knew his calling. What was his calling?
Yeah.
The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. He knew what he was called to do.
He was
right?
in the temple growing up, and his mom was
Exactly.
like, "Where are you at? You know I'm about my Father's business." Like, he knew what he was here to do.
But then he goes into that forging process in the wilderness, right, where the devil tries to use the word against the word, and it fails miserably, so the devil just has to pretty much commit suicide and drive him to the cross, right? And so what do we see? We see Christ overcoming in the forging process, resting in who he is, whose he is, what he came to do, and then where do we see reigning? Do we see reigning post-resurrection? No, I would argue that we see reigning on the cross.
Sure.
Because what Jesus Christ did was he gladly assumed sacrificial responsibility for the sins of the world, sins that he did not even commit. He gladly, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross. Now you go back one verse, and this is the point of all this. It said, "Let us run with endurance the race before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith." He knew his identity. He knew his calling. He went through the forging, and then he was reigning when he took the sins of the world and bore them in his body on the tree, when he, that is God, made him, that is Christ, who knew no sin, to be sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him. That's the point of all of this. And if you miss everything that we've said in these 4 episodes and you only get that, then the 4 of us can die happy and proud men.
Thank you for following along with the Kavod Family Podcast. Stick with us. We've got so much more coming. Please like, share, leave us a review, give us some feedback on some of this, and send it to a friend. Send it to somebody that you know might be going through a struggle, some kind of hardship. There's just 1,000 fathers out there that need encouraged every single day. Mothers, fathers that need encouraged to fulfill the calling that they have. It's not theirs. It's a divine calling from God over their life and over their family. And we need his insight and his wisdom and his truth to fulfill it. So be encouraged. Walk in him. Enjoy.